Before there were kings, before there were pyramids, before even the idea of writing down a story or counting the stars, there was rhythm. Imagine the first humans gathered around a fire tens of thousands of years ago, shadows flickering on cave walls, the smell of smoke in the air, eyes wide with fear of the dark, of animals, of the unknown. Someone picks up a stick and strikes a hollow log, another claps their hands, and suddenly the silence of the night is broken by something more than noise, a beat. That beat becomes steady, then faster, then layered with voices, feet stomping, stones clicking. In that moment, humanity discovered the heartbeat outside the body, a way to communicate without words, to feel together without language. The drum was born, not as an instrument for concerts or entertainment, but as survival, to warn of danger, to signal a hunt, to call the tribe together. And from that first beat onward, drums carried us forward through every stage of civilization. They tee the thunder of gods in temples, the march of armies in war, the pulse of celebration in villages, and the soul of ceremonies meant to heal, mourn, or unite. For thousands of years, they echoed across Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas, each culture shaping its own rhythm, its own heartbeat, yet all beating to the same ancient truth. Long before empires rose and fell, long before electricity or streaming playlists, the drum was the one technology every human understood instantly. If you strike, it speaks. Tonight, we're going to follow that sound. From the first hollow logs to the mighty war drums that shook battlefields, from sacred rituals to stadium rock concerts, from the whispered rhythms of shamans to the booming 808s that define modern music. This is not just the history of an instrument. This is the history of us, our fears, our faith, our power, our joy, all carried in rhythm. And so for the next while, forget about your phone, forget about playlists, forget about the noise of the modern world. Close your eyes, listen to the silence around you, and imagine the first time humanity ever broke that silence. Imagine the first drum beat. That is where our story begins, and that is where we're going to stay, riding the beat that never stopped, the sound that still carries across every culture, every generation, every human heart. Welcome to the history of drum. After that first hollow log echoed in a cave, humanity carried the beat forward, and as tribes grew into villages, and villages into cities, the drum never stayed behind. It became a companion of civilization itself. Picture ancient Africa, where the talking drum could carry a message across miles of jungle faster than a runner could ever move, its pitch rising and falling to mimic the tones of language, turning rhythm into speech. In West African belief, every drum held three spirits: the tree that gave its body, the animal that gave its skin, and the maker who gave it voice, meaning that each strike was not just a sound, but a conversation with the living world. Cross the ocean and step into the Great Plains of North America. Here, the powwow drum was the heartbeat of Mother Earth, a sound that bound communities together in rituals of healing, mourning, and celebration. A single strike could summon ancestors, guide vision, or restore balance between body and spirit. Travel further east to the frozen Arctic, where Inuit shamans sat in small igloos, with frame drums made of caribou skin stretched across wooden hoops, each beat drawing them deeper into trance, into dialogue with spirits of the hunt, the sea and the ice. And still further away, under the endless skies of Australia, Aboriginal elders tapped clapsticks and beat skins during dreamtime ceremonies, their rhythms preserving stories older than pyramids, older even than most rivers, mapping the land with sound, the way others mapped it with ink. What unites all these places, all these cultures, is that the drum was never just music. It was sacred technology. It was how you prayed, how you called the gods, how you spoke to the dead, how you declared yourself alive. Imagine standing in those circles, dozens, sometimes hundreds of voices chanting, feet stomping, drums pounding like thunder, and realize that for them, rhythm was not entertainment, it was existence. The beat was identity, it was law, it was the proof that you were part of something greater than yourself. From the jungles of Africa to the deserts of Asia, from the frozen tundra to tropical islands, every civilization found the same truth. When words fail, the drums speak. And in that shared heartbeat, the foundations of culture, religion, and society were laid. This is where the story shifts from survival to meaning, where the drum becomes not only a signal of life, but a sacred force shaping the destiny of entire people. As civilizations rose, drums moved from the sacred circle of ritual into the terrifying chaos of the battlefield, transforming from voices of the gods into the heartbeat of army. In ancient China, massive war drums were mounted on chariots, their thunder rolling across valleys, so loudly that whole divisions moved as one body, every soldier's strike and step perfectly timed to the booming rhythm. In Mesopotamia, temple drums were beaten, not only to praise their gods, but also to remind soldiers and citizens alike of who held divine authority. Rhythm became propaganda, keeping order as much as it inspired fear. March forward into Rome, and you find frame drums accompanying legions, their steady pulse maintaining discipline, their relentless repetition reminding every man that he was part of something larger than himself, a cog in an unstoppable machine. And then there were the Ottomans, whose metal bands carried the largest kettle drums the world had ever seen, pounding so fiercely that the ground trembled under their sound. European chroniclers wrote of soldiers freezing, unable to lift their weapons, simply because the terrifying wall of rhythm shattered their courage before swords even clashed. Yet war drums were not only the tool of empires, they were also the secret language of resistance. On plantations across the Americas, enslaved Africans used drums to communicate in ways their captors could not understand, sending signals, calling meetings, planning rebellion, rhythm as both chain and key, oppression and freedom. In every age, in every land, the drum of war was more than music. It was command, coordination, and terror combined. Imagine standing in a battlefield, mist rising, spears gleaming, when suddenly the first drum beat cuts through the door. Your heart starts to match it, faster and faster, until the rhythm owns you, until you can no longer tell if it is your pulse or the army's pulse that drives you forward. This is the true power of drums in war, not to entertain, not even to signal, but to take possession of the human spirit itself, to turn individuals into legions, fear into fury, hesitation into charge. Wherever armies marched, drums marched too, and long before the crack of gunpowder or the scream of engines, it was rhythm that made war move. As drums spread across continents, they began to reflect not only the beliefs of their people, but also the very way those societies thought about life, order, and meaning, and nowhere is that contrast sharper than between East and West. In the East, rhythm became an art of expression and spirit. In India, the tabla was not just a drum, but a language, each strike and pressure point carrying its own syllable, its own spoken sound, until entire poems could be played on stretched skin. To study tabla was to memorize thousands of patterns, recited like chants, passed from master to disciple, echoing a cultural truth that rhythm itself could speak as clearly as words. In Japan, the taiko drum became both sacred and martial, enormous drums that required whole bodies to move them, struck with a force that seemed to shake the heavens themselves, used in festivals to cool down gods, and in war to drive forward samurai legions. In Indonesia, the kendang carried the heartbeat of gamelan ensembles, weaving polyrhythms that mirrored the cosmic balance of their universe, where every strike represented harmony among earth, sky, and spirit. In the West, the drum took a different path, rhythm as order, as structure, as control. Medieval Europe reduced drums mostly to signals, the snare drum calling soldiers to march, the kettle drum announcing kings in their courts, the steady tattoo of military cadence, teaching discipline more than inspiration. While Eastern cultures celebrated rhythm as a living, breathing force that could change with the mood of the player, Western tradition insisted that drums served the measure of time, the strict grid of music where every strike had to be exact, predictable, contained. By the Renaissance and Baroque eras, European orchestras accepted drums, but only as background, timpani beating the same few notes to mark grandeur, while melody and harmony took the spotlight. Two worlds, two philosophies. East saw rhythm as art, improvisation,
spirit. West saw rhythm as math, order, law, and yet, both were right, for the drum can be both freedom and discipline, both chaos and control depending on the hands that strike it. Imagine standing in a Japanese festival with taiko booming like thunder in your chest, then walking into a European parade, where snare drums crack like rifles in perfect, rigid unison. Both overwhelm you, both move you, but in utterly different ways. This is the duality of rhythm, not one truth, but many, carried in skins and sticks across the globe, shaping the way entire civilizations felt time itself. If rhythm could move armies and shape empires, then it could also reach the heavens, and so the drum became not only a weapon of war or a voice of culture, but a sacred bridge between the human and the divine. Across West Africa, the Bata drums spoke directly to the Orishas, each rhythm calling forth a different deity, one pattern to summon the thunder god, another to invite the goddess of rivers, another still to honor the spirits of the ancestors. To play these rhythms was not performance, it was prayer, and the wrong beat could insult a god as surely as the right one could draw their blessing. In India, the tiny damaru held in the hands of Shiva symbolized the heartbeat of the cosmos itself, its rapid-fire rattling marking the cycles of creation and destruction, reminding worshippers that rhythm was not only sacred, but eternal. In Buddhist monasteries of Tibet and Japan, great frame drums accompanied chants, their deep booms sinking the breath of monks into one shared pulse, a sound intended to align human spirit with cosmic harmony. Among Native American nations, the communal drum was the heartbeat of Mother Earth, struck in powwows to call communities together, in funerals to guide souls to the afterlife, in healing ceremonies to restore balance to body and spirit. And in the Americas, where enslaved Africans brought their traditions across the ocean, gospel and church rhythms grew from sorrow into joy, the drumbeat of spirituals transforming pain into hope, rebellion into praise. Even in Christianity, where European tradition had often shunned drums as wild or pagan, the African American church reclaimed rhythm as the language of liberation, every clap, every stomp, every beat an act of survival and faith. Imagine standing in a Yoruba ceremony, the bata drums spiraling faster and faster, until dancers fall into trance, then shift to a gospel church where hand drums, tambourine, and clapping hands turn grief into celebration, then walk into a Buddhist monastery, where each strike of the drum feels like the universe itself inhaling and exhaling. Different worlds, different gods, different prayers, but always the same truth. The drum does not merely accompany worship, it is worship. In every corner of the earth, from shrines to cathedrals, from temples to sweat lodges, from deserts to forests, the drum remained the one instrument that could cross the boundary between human and divine, carrying voices upward, carrying blessings downward, teaching us that faith itself has always had a rhythm. For thousands of years drums had been communal, great circles of rhythm, battalions of war, temples of prayer. But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, something extraordinary happened. The drum was reinvented, not as the voice of many, but as the voice of one. In America, where marching bands filled streets and theaters with snare rolls, bass thumps and cymbal crashes, orchestras grew frustrated at needing 3 or 4 percussionists to play separate parts. The solution was not to simplify the music, but to invent a way for one person to control it all. Enter 1909, and the birth of the bass drum pedal, a simple foot mechanism that allowed a drummer to strike the largest drum without putting down the sticks in their hand. Suddenly the impossible became possible. One musician could keep time with their foot, play rolls with their hands, and color the rhythm with cymbals, wood blocks, and cowbells. By the roaring 1920s, jazz had seized this invention and transformed it into an art form. In smoky clubs, drummers like Baby Dodds and Zooty Singleton built the foundations of the modern kit, snares rattling sharp rhythms, bass pedals pounding steady heartbeats, cymbals shimmering like laughter in the night. The drum kit wasn't just an instrument, it was a revolution. Gene Krupa turned it into spectacle, lifting the drummer from the back of the band to the blazing spotlight, his solos so wild and dramatic that people came just to watch the man behind the skin. Then came the rock explosion, John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, thundering so powerfully he seemed to shake stadiums, Keith Moon of The Who demolishing his kit as if the drums themselves were not instruments, but wild animals to be broken. Neil Peart of Rush, turning rhythm into philosophy, surrounding himself with dozens of drums and cymbals, until his kit looked like the cockpit of a starship. With each decade, the kit grew, expanded, adapted. Jazz, swing, rock, punk, metal, every genre carved its sound through the drum kit. And in this transformation something deeper was revealed. For the first time a single drummer could command an entire world of rhythm alone, embodying both the discipline of the military march and the freedom of the shaman's. The drum kit was the child of centuries of tradition, but also the parent of modern music. Imagine standing in a jazz club in 1930, the kit snapping like fire, then in a rock arena in 1970, the kit roaring like thunder, then today, where acoustic shells merge with electronic pads, a hybrid heartbeat that links past to future. This is what the drum kit gave humanity, not just rhythm, but individuality. One person, two sticks, four limbs, infinite voices. If the drum is the world's heartbeat, then each culture gave that beat its own accent, its own personality, its own story. Begin in West Africa, where the djembe reigns, carved from a single tree, topped with stretched goatskin, played with bare hands, capable of tones so sharp they cut the air, and so deep they rattle your chest. The djembe is not just an instrument, it is a community itself, played in circles where every rhythm intertwines, every strike telling stories of birth, harvest and journey. Beside it, the talking drum bends pitch like human speech, sending messages across villages, carrying gossip, warnings, even poetry miles through open air. Travel north and east to the Middle East, where the darbuka sings in the hands of belly dancers and mystics alike, its goblet shape perfect for fast rolls and quick-fire accents, echoing through stone courtyards, under desert moon. Step into the Caribbean, and the congas and bongos take over, children of Africa reborn in the New World, their rhythms shaping salsa, rumba, and every dance that shakes hips and feet across Latin. Move further south into Brazil, and the surdo pounds the heartbeat of samba, huge drums worn on the body, beaten in parades so loud they blur with the roar of crowds and fireworks, the rhythm so infectious, it feels less like music and more like carnival itself. Speaking through the street. In India, the mridangam and tabla weave complexity so precise, it seems like mathematics disguised as magic. Players, speaking syllables for each stroke, turning beats into language, time into poetry, rhythm into philosophy. Cross into East Asia, and Chinese festival drums thunder through dragon dances, their giant shells painted with symbols of luck and power. Japanese taiko shake mountains with their sheer size and discipline, the drummers moving like warriors, each strike a ritual, a store. Journey to the Arctic and northern Russia, and you'll find frame drums still used in shamanic ceremonies, each slow boom, echoing into trance, guiding souls to vision. In Europe, the bodhran of Ireland beats alongside fiddles, a raw heartbeat that drives reels and jigs, while in the Balkans, tapan drums roar during weddings, festivals and wars alike, their sound inseparable from the joy and struggle of life itself. And beyond these, smaller treasures exist everywhere. Pacific Island slit drums carved from bamboo, hand pans born in modern Switzerland creating alien tones, Native American water drums filled with liquid to shift their pitch. The world's drums are as diverse as its languages, yet they share the same origin: skin, wood, hands, heartbeat. Imagine traveling across the globe and hearing all of these voices, different shapes, different songs, different prayers, yet beneath them all you recognize the same truth. No matter the culture, no matter the continent, the drum always returns to the pulse of life, to the reminder that rhythm is universal, even when melody and words divide us. The world has always spoken in many tongues, but its heartbeat has only ever had one language. For thousands of years drums meant wood, skin, hands, and muscle, but in the late 20th century, rhythm was reborn, not in forests or temples, but in circuits, wires, and code. The digital revolution didn't just change the drum, it redefined it. In the 1970s, engineers experimented with mechanical rhythm boxes that could keep time for organ players, simple clicks, and beeps that sounded more like robots than humans. But musicians are restless, and what was meant as a metronome became an instrument. Then came the Roland TR-808 in 1980, and nothing was ever the same. Critics dismissed it at first, calling its sounds artificial, even laughable, because its bass was too heavy, its snares too sharp, its hand claps too alien. But artists heard something else. They heard possibility. Hip-hop pioneers grabbed the 808 and built an entire culture on its thunderous bass drops and crisp snares, turning city blocks into dance floors, car stereos into battlefields of rhythm. Electronic producers took the machine and bent it into techno, house, trance, new genres born, not from tradition, but from innovation, where rhythm could be shaped, looped and layered infinitely. The drum machine gave power to the bedroom producer, to the kid with no band, no orchestra, just a box of buttons and imagination. Soon, digital samplers allowed drummers to capture any sound, a kick, a clap, a door slam, even the heartbeat of a lover, and transform it into rhythm. By the 1990s and 2000s, the marriage of acoustic and digital created hybrid kits, drummers hitting real cymbals with one hand, tapping glowing pads with the other, commanding both the old heartbeat of humanity and a new pulse of machine. And still the 808 ruled, its deep bass now the foundation of modern trap, EDM, pop, so iconic that even decades later, songs rise and fall on its subsonic thunder. Imagine the leap from a cave dweller beating a log to a DJ in a neon-lit club triggering rhythms on a laptop, both doing the same thing separated by tens of thousands of years, striking, repeating, finding pulse. The digital revolution didn't kill the drum, it proved its immortality. Rhythm no longer required skin, wood, or even a human hand. All it needed was imagination, electricity, and a desire to move body. And yet even in the glowing screens and electronic grids, the truth remained the same. The machine's beat still echoed, the ancient heartbeat of humanity, still carrying us forward, on the rhythm we first discovered around a fire in the dark. Civilizations have risen and fallen, languages have flourished and disappeared, empires have stretched across continents, and then crumbled into dust. And yet, through every change, one sound has never left us: the drum. Why? Because it was never just an instrument, it was always us. Even before we are born, inside the womb, we hear the heartbeat of our mother, steady, constant, unrelenting, the first rhythm we ever know, the rhythm that defines life itself. And when we enter the world, we carry that rhythm forward, our pulse, our steps, our breath, all in time. The drum is a mirror of that truth, which is why no matter how technology advances, no matter how societies transform, we never let it go. From cave fires to cathedrals, from battlefields to nightclubs, from sacred rituals to stadium concerts, the drum adapts, evolves, and survives. It has been carved from trees, stretched with animal skin, hammered from bronze, coded into silicon, and still, every version is the same heartbeat, dressed in new clothes. When people say the drum is primitive, they miss the point. It is primal, which is not weakness, but strength, the foundation on which all music rests. Imagine humanity's journey without it. No war cries, no rituals, no jazz clubs, no rock anthems, no dance floors. Without the drum, silence would have swallowed us long ago, and yet here we are, still building beats, still stomping our feet, still turning life into rhythm. That is why the drum survives, because it is not entertainment, not background, not accessory. It is survival, it is communication, it is worship, it is rebellion, it is joy. It is the heartbeat that never stops, carrying us from the first human to the last, linking us across time, across culture, across every different. Long after skyscrapers collapse and satellites fall, long after words shift into languages no one today would recognize, the sound of a hand striking a hollow shell will still speak, because when all else fades, rhythm remains. The drum is eternal because the drum is us, our past, our present, and our future, beating in unison, as it always has, and as it always will. If drums could march armies and summon gods, then they could also ignite joy, and across every age, every continent, they became the heart of celebration. Imagine an African village, the harvest finally gathered, hunger banished for another season. Night falls, a fire is lit, and slowly the djembe begins to speak. First a soft pulse, then another joining, then 10 more, until the whole village is drawn into the circle. Children stamp their feet, elders clap their hands, voices rise in call and response, and the night becomes a living organism, pulsing with rhythm. Cross the oceans to medieval Europe. Peasants, weary from toil, pour into the square after a festival match. There is no wealth, no finery, but there is the steady beat of the tabor and pipe, a small drum rattling against wooden shoes, guiding dancers into lines and spirals, until for one night they forget the burdens of serfdom. In the Caribbean, born from struggle and survival, the conga and bongo created carnivals of defiance, parades, where rhythm drowned out oppression, where every beat declared, "We are still alive." In Brazil, the surdo anchors samba schools, its deep heartbeat so powerful that hundreds of dancers seem to breathe in unison, their feet moving only because the drum commands it. Imagine the energy of carnival, an entire city moving as one body, millions of people who do not know each other, yet all connected by a single bass pulse that rattles their bones. Travel to India, and the dal erupts at weddings, the double-headed drum pounding loud enough to carry across miles of farmland, announcing to everyone, family, neighbors, strangers, that joy has arrived, and it must be shared. Every strike is laughter in sound, every rhythm, a promise of new beginnings, and in every culture, from the Bodhran of Ireland driving reels in smoky pubs, to the taiko of Japan shaking summer festivals with earth-shattering thunder, celebration has always needed rhythm to come alive. Because joy is not silent, it is noisy, uncontainable, impossible to hold back. The drum takes that joy and magnifies it, turning small smiles into roaring chants, quiet gatherings into massive festivals. Wherever people have something to celebrate, a harvest, a wedding, a birth, a victory, even survival itself, the drum is there, louder than words, brighter than fire, carrying the truth that happiness is not meant to be hidden, but shared in rhythm. And in that moment you understand why celebration always sounds the same across the world, a beat, a pulse, a drum. If celebration gave the drum its joy, then storytelling gave it its memory, and for countless generations, drums were not only instruments of rhythm, but instruments of history. Imagine a West African griot seated before his community, the djembe and dunun, at his side, his voice rising and falling with the beat, as he recounts the genealogy of kings, the victories of ancestors, the tragedies and triumphs of entire people. The rhythm is not decoration, it is structure, each beat marking chapters in the tale, each roll signaling a change in the story's path. Cross to Native America, where water drums and large frame drums echoed alongside chants, their steady pulse guiding oral traditions, passed from elder to youth, so that even if words shifted or details blurred, the rhythm ensured the story's shape remained intact. In Polynesia, slit drums carved from massive logs became not only instruments, but archives, each carved design representing lineage, migration, the very journey of whole islands, carried across waves. And in Ireland, the bodhran did more than drive jigs, it carried rebellion in coded rhythm, stories, sung in pubs, where words might be censored, but beats could still speak. Everywhere the drum allowed memory to live longer than ink or stone, because rhythm is harder to silence than books, and beats can travel where scrolls cannot. Even in modern times, when griots became singers, rappers, poets, the principle remained the same, rhythm as container of memory, percussion as protector of heritage. Imagine a young child listening to the pulse of drums at night, not yet understanding the words, but knowing the story, by the way the rhythm rises in danger, slows in sorrow, races in triumph. For humanity, the drum was never just sound, it was archive, it was storyteller, it was the way we remembered ourselves, before we had libraries, before we had films, before we had the internet. And even today, every time we dance, clap or tap our feet to a beat, we are remembering stories far older than our own. The drum as messenger. If storytelling gave the drum memory, then communication gave it wings, because long before telegraphs and radios, humans discovered that rhythm could travel farther than voices, faster than footsteps, and clearer than smoke. In West Africa, the talking drum, shaped like an hourglass, could tighten and loosen its chords to imitate the tone and pitch of human speech. Skilled drummers could send entire sentences across forests, villages, passing along messages that stretched for miles, so that news of danger or ceremony spread in minutes instead of days. Imagine hearing a drum beat in the distance, not random noise but a language, announcing a birth, warning of an attack, calling for a gathering. In the Caribbean, enslaved Africans adapted this power to survive, sending coded rhythms between plantations that overseers could not understand, so that the drum became not only messenger, but resistance itself, carrying plans for rebellion hidden inside patterns of sound. In Polynesia and Melanesia, slit drums carved from massive logs served the same role. Struck with heavy sticks, their booming voices carried across valleys like thunder, announcing arrivals, marking rituals, summoning communities with signals only insiders could decode. Even armies adopted this truth. In China, war drums commanded troops to advance or retreat, their beats traveling farther and clearer than shouted orders could ever reach. In Europe, fifes and snare drums marched with regiments, every roll a signal to move, turn, or attack. The drum became a messenger, not because people lacked words, but because rhythm never tires, never falters, and carries farther than the strongest voice. Imagine standing on a hilltop hearing the faint call of a drum on the wind, knowing its message belongs to you, a signal from your people across miles of wilderness. The drum's beat was never just music, it was connection, a bridge across distance, a wireless signal, centuries before electricity. It taught humanity that communication does not always need ink or voice. Sometimes, all you need is a rhythm that carries meaning inside it.
The drum of identity a bit. If the drum could tell stories and carry messages, then it could also define identity. Because in every culture, rhythm was never just background sound, it was the signature of a people. In West Africa, each ethnic group guarded its rhythms like treasures, patterns that outsiders could never fully imitate, because they were more than beats, they were lineage, bloodlines struck into skin and wood. To hear a rhythm was to know who you were, where you came from, which ancestors watched over you. In Native America, the communal drum stood at the center of powwows, the big drum not belonging to one player but to all, symbolizing unity, nationhood, the heartbeat of a people who had survived against impossible odds. In Ireland, the bodhran carried not only folk tunes but also the soul of a nation, resisting conquest, its simple pulse reminding villagers who they were when borders, languages, and freedoms were threatened. In Brazil and the Caribbean, enslaved Africans rebuilt their identity in drums, congas, bongos, atabaques, instruments that carried fragments of home across the ocean, fragments powerful enough to survive centuries of erasure. Even in Asia, the taiko of Japan or the kendang of Indonesia did not just entertain, they proclaimed cultural strength, the sound of a community speaking in rhythm. Imagine being part of such a moment, a circle where the rhythm being played is not random, not generic, but yours, your people's sound, your ancestors' memory, your community's heartbeat. No empire, no conqueror, no outsider could ever erase it, because rhythm travels in bodies and bones, not just in instruments. That is why the drum has always been more than music. It is identity embodied, the sound of belonging, the proof that you are part of a chain stretching across centuries. Every time a community strikes its drums, it is saying to the world, this is who we are, this is who we have always been, and this is who we will remain. The drum of resistance. Across the Caribbean and the Americas, enslaved Africans kept alive forbidden rhythms, using them to send secret messages, to plan revolts, to remind themselves they were not broken, only displaced. Every conga and bongo beat whispered rebellion, we are still here. In Brazil, capoeira fighters disguised their martial training as dance, with the atabaque drum leading movements that were actually preparation for survival, a rhythm that masked defiance under joy. In Ireland, when language was suppressed and traditions outlawed, the bodhran kept rebellion alive in taverns, its pulse carrying songs of freedom even when words had to be hidden. In Native America, powwow drums continued to thunder even when ceremonies were banned,
each strike an act of survival against erasure. The Ottomans and later colonized peoples alike found power in massive war drums, their sheer volume an act of psychological resistance, saying to enemies, "You may take our land, but you will never silence our sound." Imagine standing in a secret gathering where drummers pound out rhythms forbidden by law, every beat carrying both fear and courage, every strike louder than chain. Oppressors often tried to ban drums for this very reason, because they understood something crucial. Silence breaks people more easily than hardship. But rhythm kept communities unbroken, unafraid, unwilling to forget themselves. The drum was the heartbeat of rebellion, not only against rulers and armies, but against despair itself. And every time a hand struck skin in defiance, it declared that freedom may be delayed but never destroyed. This is the drum of resistance, louder than tyranny, older than conquest, eternal as survival itself. The drum of transformation. If resistance gave the drum its defiance, then transformation gave it its power to adapt, because unlike other instruments that rose and fell with fashions, the drum has always reshaped itself for new world. When wood was scarce, people carved drums from clay. When animal skins were forbidden, they turned to metal, to plastic, to synthetic fibers. When colonizers banned the rhythms of enslaved Africans, those rhythms disguised themselves in new dances, rumba, samba, blues, traditions reborn under different names but carrying the same heartbeat. In Asia, ancient taiko once used for war became festival drums that today summon joy instead of fear, their thunder now uniting crowds in streets rather than armies in battlefield. In the Middle East, the darbuka moved from sacred circles to cabaret stages, shifting its identity without losing its soul. Even in the modern age, transformation never stopped. Jazz turned the drum kit into improvisation, rock turned it into rebellion, hip-hop turned it into revolution. Every time the world tried to contain rhythm, rhythm slipped out of the box, found a new skin, a new body, a new purpose. Imagine a river that changes its course, but never stops flowing. That is what the drum has always been for humanity. Where harps, lutes, and lyres faded into history, the drum reinvented itself to survive. And in each transformation, it gained new voices without losing its oldest one, the voice of the heartbeat. That is why, whether struck by stick, hand, foot, or circuit, the drum always feels familiar, because it is never only about the instrument itself, but about the pulse it carries, a pulse that refuses to die, a rhythm that always finds a way to return. The drum of community. If transformation gave the drum its resilience, then community gave it its soul, because rhythm was never meant to be played alone. Across time, the drum has always pulled people together, weaving individuals into a collective heartbeat. In Africa, drumming circles were not performances but gatherings, where each player's rhythm layered into the next, until the whole group became one organism, breathing and moving in unison. In Native America, the great powwow drum was struck not by one drummer but by many hands, each hit symbolizing not I but we, a sound that could only exist when everyone contributed. In the Pacific Islands, slit drums carved from trees were played in call and response, one village striking a rhythm that another would answer, turning geography itself into a choir of percussion. In the Caribbean, carnival drumming blurred the line between performer and audience, because the moment the beat began, everyone joined in, hips, feet, voices, hands, until the street itself seemed alive. Even in Europe, medieval festivals placed drummers at the center of the square, their rhythm knitting together dancers, singers, merchants, priests, and peasants into one body of sound. Imagine how it feels to step into such a circle. You arrive as an individual, but the drum pulls you outward, absorbs your heartbeat into its larger pulse, until your body no longer belongs to you alone, but to the group. That is the secret of drums. They erase isolation. They remind humans that survival was always communal, that identity was always shared, that no one's rhythm is complete without another's to answer. From temples to nightclubs, from weddings to protests, the drum's greatest gift has always been this: the power to turn many into one, to transform strangers into family, to remind us that humanity itself is a rhythm best played together. The drum of healing. If community gave the drum its soul, then healing gave it its grace, because for thousands of years, rhythm has been medicine as much as music. In Africa, healers played djembes and dunans, in ceremonies where the pulse was meant not to entertain, but to cleanse, each beat calling the body back into balance, each rhythm chasing away sickness like smoke from fire. Among Native American nations, the great frame drum was struck slowly and steadily, believed to echo the heartbeat of Mother Earth, guiding those in grief through mourning and those in sickness back toward wholeness. Shamans in Siberia and the Arctic entered trance through their drums, the deep rolling boom transporting them into spirit worlds, where they could intercede for their people, seeking cures from ancestors or nature itself. In Asia, Buddhist monks have long used drums to accompany chants, the vibration not only filling temples but resonating through bodies, a sound said to align breath, heart and mind. Even in modern science, doctors have begun to rediscover what ancient cultures always knew: rhythm lowers stress, synchronizes brain waves, strengthens immune response. A circle of drummers playing together in therapy sessions can ease trauma, reduce anxiety, even lift depression. Imagine sitting in such a circle, your hands hesitant at first, then falling into the beat, your pulse syncing with those around you, until suddenly, the weight you carry feels lighter, shared, dispersed into the rhythm itself. Healing does not always come from medicine. Sometimes it comes from remembering that we are not alone, that our heartbeat is not broken, only waiting to be retuned. That is the gift of the healing drum. It does not cure by force, but by reminding us of what we already carry: rhythm, balance, connection, life itself. In every land, in every time, whenever pain threatened to divide us from ourselves, the drum was there to guide us back home. As civilizations rose, drums moved from the sacred circle of ritual into the terrifying chaos of the battlefield, transforming from voices of the gods into the heartbeat of army. In ancient China, massive war drums were mounted on chariots, their thunder rolling across valleys, so loudly that whole divisions moved as one body, every soldier's strike and step perfectly timed to the booming rhythm. In Mesopotamia, temple drums were beaten, not only to praise their gods, but also to remind soldiers and citizens alike of who held divine authority. Rhythm became propaganda, keeping order as much as it inspired fear. March forward into Rome, and you find frame drums accompanying legions, their steady pulse maintaining discipline, their relentless repetition, reminding every man that he was part of something larger than himself, a cog in an unstoppable machine. And then there were the Ottomans, whose metal bands carried the largest kettle drums the world had ever seen, pounding so fiercely that the ground trembled under their sound. European chroniclers wrote of soldiers freezing, unable to lift their weapons, simply because the terrifying wall of rhythm shattered their courage before swords even clashed. Yet war drums were not only the tool of empires, they were also the secret language of resistance. On plantations across the Americas, enslaved Africans used drums to communicate in ways their captors could not understand, sending signals, calling meetings, planning rebellion, rhythm as both chain and key, oppression and freedom. In every age, in every land, the drum of war was more than music. It was command, coordination and terror combined. Imagine standing in a battlefield, mist rising, spears gleaming, when suddenly the first drumbeat cuts through the door. Your heart starts to match it, faster and faster, until the rhythm owns you, until you can no longer tell if it is your pulse or the army's pulse that drives you forward. This is the true power of drums in war: not to entertain, not even to signal, but to take possession of the human spirit itself, to turn individuals into legions, fear into fury, hesitation into charge. Wherever armies marched, drums marched too, and long before the crack of gunpowder or the scream of engines, it was rhythm that made war move. The drum of time. If healing gave the drum its grace, then time gave it its structure, because long before clocks ticked on walls or watches wrapped around wrists, Rhythm was how humans measured the passing of life. In Africa, farmers knew the season of planting not only by the stars but by the ceremonial rhythms struck in villages, beats that marked the turning of the year. In the Americas, great drums accompanied the cycles of the moon, guiding rituals that mirrored the waxing and waning of light. In Asia, temple drums rang at dawn and dusk, their booms rolling across valleys to remind communities when to rise, when to pray, when to rest. In medieval Europe, monasteries kept time with bells, but earlier still it was drums that punctuated the hours, the steady strikes dividing day into work and worship. Even armies marched to the beat of drums, not simply to stay in step, but to mark the rhythm of distance, to know how long they had traveled, how far remained to go. Imagine a world without digital screens, without calendars, without alarms, a world where your sense of time came from sound, from the pulse of rhythm carried across fields, mountains. The drum taught humanity that life itself is cyclical, that beginnings and endings are always linked by pulse. Every heartbeat is a clock, every rhythm a measure, every strike a reminder that time is not silence, but sound. And even now, when seconds are counted by machines, the drum continues to remind us of time's deeper truth, that it is not something to be read on a screen, but felt in the body. The drum is time itself, ancient, unrelenting, and eternal. The drum of ceremony. If time gave the drum its structure, then ceremony gave it its purpose, because for as long as humans have gathered in rituals, the drum has been at the center, guiding every gesture, every chant, every step. In Africa, initiation rites for young men and women were marked with drum circles, rhythms that symbolized the crossing from childhood to adulthood, from innocence to responsibility. In India, temple festivals filled the air with mridangam and dal, their patterns woven with dance, incense, and prayer, creating a tapestry where the divine felt present in every vibration. In the Americas, birth and death alike were accompanied by drums, at births, to welcome new souls into the world with a heartbeat echoing their mothers, at funerals to guide spirits to the ancestors with a rhythm that eased sorrow and reminded the living that life continued. In Japan, taiko ensembles thunder through summer Matsuri festivals, not simply as entertainment, but as offerings to the gods, each strike a promise of devotion. Even in medieval Europe, coronations and royal ceremonies were incomplete without kettle drums, their booming voices announcing power in ways words could not. Imagine standing in the middle of such a ritual, flames flickering, incense burning, voices chanting, bodies moving in unison, and always the drum keeping the world in order. Ceremony is humanity's attempt to give meaning to the moments that define us: birth, marriage, harvest, mourning, and the drum has always been the thread stitching those moments together. Without rhythm, ceremony feels empty, directionless, but with drums, it becomes timeless, powerful, unforgettable. Across centuries and across cultures, whenever humanity needed to mark what matters most, it was not speeches or monuments that carried the weight, it was the steady, echoing voice of the drum. The drum of power. If ceremony gave the drum its meaning, then power gave it its weight, because from palaces to parliaments, rulers have always understood that rhythm speaks to crowds more deeply than words. In ancient Mesopotamia, temple drums did more than honor gods. They reminded people that priests and kings held authority over both heaven and earth. In China, imperial courts announced decrees with giant drums, whose sound traveled farther than the voice of any minister, so that obedience began not with reading a scroll but with hearing a strike. In medieval Europe, kettle drums became the official sound of monarchy. No coronation, no royal parade, no declaration of war was complete without their booming thunder. The Ottomans perfected this into spectacle, their metabands of dozens of drummers and horn players, terrifying not only enemies, but their own subjects, making clear through sound alone that the Sultan's reach was absolute. In Africa, chiefs and kings sat upon thrones flanked by royal drummers, whose rhythms announced their presence. To hear the king's drum was to feel his power, whether you saw him or not. Imagine standing in a square, as the ruler enters. You may not understand the language of decrees, you may not see his face among soldiers and banners, but the sound of drums tells you everything. Authority is here, order is here, obedience is demanded. Even in modern politics, rallies and parades depend on drums to magnify charisma, to turn speeches into movements, to make leaders feel larger than life. Because rhythm reaches the body before reason, it bypasses thought and goes straight to instinct. Power has always borrowed that pathway, using drums to make crowds march when they would rather resist, to make citizens cheer when they would rather question. This is why rulers across the world feared silence more than dissent, because silence cannot be commanded, but rhythm can. And so through every age, the drum has carried not only the sound of joy, worship or war, but also the weight of power itself, booming louder than crowns, banners or swords. The drum of fear, if power gave the drum its weight, then fear gave it its shadow, because rhythm has never been only joy or prayer. It has also been the sound that made hearts race and spines shiver. On ancient battlefields in China, the thunder of massive war drums struck terror long before soldiers clashed, their echo rolling across hills like approaching storms, convincing enemies that they faced not men but gods of thunder. In the Ottoman Empire, metal bands wielded drums, so colossal that European chroniclers wrote of their sound freezing armies in place, courage dissolving before the first arrow flew. In Africa, ritual drumming could invoke spirits not only to heal but also to punish, and the deep rolling of bass drums in initiation rites could terrify those unprepared for what was to come. Among Native American tribes, certain rhythms were forbidden outside of ceremony, their sound believed powerful enough to draw spirits of vengeance, and to hear them at night meant danger was near. In medieval Europe, kettle drums booming through streets at night were less music than warning. Soldiers had come, punishment followed, and silence might be safer than resistance. Even in modern times, dictators understood how to use drums. In parades, rallies, marches, rhythm transformed fear into obedience, the steady beat reminding every listener that the state's heart was stronger than their own. Imagine standing in a square where drums do not celebrate or heal, but command and intimidate, each strike like a fist against your chest, each rhythm demanding submission. Fear has always been rhythm's darker face, the proof that sound can wound as surely as silence can comfort. And yet even in its most terrifying forms, the drum remained a mirror of humanity itself, powerful, primal, impossible to ignore, able to make us tremble long before we understand why. The drum of mystery, if fear gave the drum its shadow, then mystery gave it its depth, because through history, there have always been rhythms that people could not explain, sounds that seemed to come not from human hands but from somewhere beyond. In African villages, sacred drums were hidden away, never to be touched by the uninitiated, because their rhythms were believed to call spirits too powerful for ordinary ears. In the Arctic, shamans beat their frame drums, and claimed they traveled to other realms, crossing into worlds invisible to most, guided only by vibration. In the temples of India, certain Ridiyangam patterns were said to align with cosmic cycles, rhythms so intricate, they mirrored the movement of planets, suggesting that the universe itself was drumming in secret time. In Europe, medieval legends whispered of phantom drummers, whose sounds echoed through forests or battlefields with no players to be found, omens of death or disaster. Sailors on distant seas told of hearing drum beats across waves on nights when no land was near, as if the ocean itself carried hidden ceremonies in its depths. Even today, unexplained rhythms surface, distant booms known as skyquakes, mysterious pulses recorded by geologists, natural beats that remind us that not all drumming belongs to humans. Imagine standing alone at night and hearing a rhythm faint but clear, carried on the wind or the water, a beat you cannot trace, a pulse you cannot explain. Is it memory? Is it nature? Is it the gods themselves? Mystery has always surrounded rhythm because rhythm is bigger than logic, older than explanation. The drum does not only live in hands and skins, it lives in the world itself, in the thunder, in the waves, in the heart. And so every culture has whispered the same truth. To play the drum is to speak a language we did not invent, but merely discover. The drum of nature, if mystery gave the drum its depth, then nature gave it its origin, because before humans carved wood or stretched skin, The world itself was already drumming. Thunder across the sky is the first bass rolling over mountains and valleys, echoing louder than any man-made instrument. Waves crashing on the shore create endless polyrhythms, never the same yet always familiar, a beat that lulled our ancestors long before they struck their first laugh. The crack of ice breaking on a frozen river, the hollow boom of falling trees in deep forests, the pounding hooves of animals racing across plains. Each was percussion, each was rhythm, each was proof that the earth itself carries a heartbeat. Indigenous cultures did not invent this truth. They recognized it. For them, to drum was not to impose sound but to echo the voices of wind, fire, rain, and stone. Imagine sitting in a cave tens of thousands of years ago, listening as rain hits the roof in steady drops, thunder booms outside, and your own heartbeat answers in your chest. The first concert, unplanned but unforgettable. Even now, when we close our eyes to meditate or to sleep, we find calm in recordings of rainfall, waves, or storms, nature's own percussion, as ancient as time. Every culture that created drums was really imitating what they already heard around them, the pulse of the earth, the cycles of the seasons, the rhythms that make existence possible. To drum is to join that conversation, to sync our fragile lives with forces far greater than us. And so, whether we strike skin, wood, or digital pads, we are only copying the oldest drummer of all, the planet itself, whose rhythms never end. The drum of the future. If nature gave the drum its origin, then the future will decide its destiny. And even now, rhythm is marching forward into worlds our ancestors could never imagine. Once we carved drums from trees. Today we code them into circuits, and tomorrow they may exist only as waves of light. In recording studios, drummers no longer strike skins alone. They play digital pads linked to thousands of sounds, each hit summoning not wood or leather, but voices of galaxies, machines, even imagined instruments that do not exist in the physical world. Artificial intelligence has begun to compose rhythms that no human hand could play, beats too fast or too complex for muscles, but perfect for processing. In virtual reality, players step into arenas where drums do not sit in front of them but surround them, floating in air, struck with gestures that blur the line between body and sound. Yet even as the tools change, the truth remains. The future of the drum will still be the future of humanity itself. Imagine a colony on Mars where settlers gather in domes far from Earth, striking metal and plastic containers to remind themselves of the heartbeat they left behind. Imagine children in the year 3000, tapping rhythms on surfaces that glow, discovering, as we once did in caves, that hitting something in time creates magic. The future may bring silence in some forms, but rhythm will survive because we cannot live without it. Whether it is sampled, simulated, or synthesized, the drum will remain the link between our first firelit circles and our last journeys to the stars. The future belongs to many unknowns, but this we can say with certainty. The drum will follow us wherever we go, because rhythm is not a tradition or a fashion. It is the core of being alive. The eternal heartbeat. If the future will carry the drum to the stars, then eternity will ensure it never dies, because the drum has always been more than an instrument. It has been the mirror of life itself. From the hollow logs of our ancestors to the glowing pads of our machines, the story of rhythm is the story of humanity. Survival, worship, power, fear, joy, resistance, identity, and hope, all carried in sound. Imagine this, tens of thousands of years ago, in a cave, a single beat called strangers together. Imagine today in cities of steel and glass, millions still gathering in clubs, concerts, and ceremonies, moving to that same invisible thread. Imagine tomorrow on distant worlds, settlers striking improvised drums against metal walls, carrying with them the pulse of Earth. The drum has never belonged to one culture, one nation, or one time. It belongs to us all because it is us all. Every heartbeat we carry is a drumbeat waiting to be joined with others. Every pulse a reminder that we are part of something greater, louder, eternal. When the last monument crumbles, when languages fade, when even memory grows quiet, the sound of rhythm will remain. Strike a surface, clap your hands, stamp your feet, and there it is, the oldest language, the first technology, the eternal heartbeat of humanity. The drum began with us, it will end with us, and in between, it will always remind us of who we are. Because long before history began and long after history is forgotten, there will always be rhythm. There will always be the drum.